There are two ways to meet everything happening in our lives. And one way is to say to ourselves, all right, we need to have God's help with this, and with His help, I'll tackle this. And the other way is to say, God has already dealt with this. And the first way is the way we seem to often tackle things. Some event crops up, the computer breaks down, or the sale doesn't come through, or the people aren't there whom we made the appointment with, or the bank account isn't where we thought it was, or somebody just speaks to us the wrong way. And we think, well, I have to tackle this somehow, and with God's grace, I'll tackle it. I'm knocked off a bit at the moment, but I'll gather myself together and then I'll deal with it. And sometimes that involves trying to work out some way to deal with it ourselves. We think now, oh, the bank balance is lower than I thought. Okay, now I can do this and this and this. Yeah, then I don't need to do that. Yeah. Okay, Lord, thank you. You can give me grace to tackle this. But for those few moments, there is anxiety and there's worry. And of course, in certain situations, there can be a response to somebody else that isn't from the heart of Jesus. The other way, of course, is immediate, complete confidence that God has already dealt with this thing. And there isn't even that tremor, that shake when you see the bank balance, or when you realize the car has something wrong with it, or you see that the computer has broken down yet again, or someone says something that shows you that circumstances aren't going to go the way you thought they would go that week. There isn't even that tremor. There isn't even that moment of panic. There's just immediate peace. And of course, the way we usually tackle it is the other way. We certainly think that God's grace will be available to us. We certainly think He'll help us. But away at the back of our minds is the thought, God helps those who help themselves. And for those few moments, we think, no, what am I? And sometimes we don't even get as far as what am I? And we maybe sometimes don't get as far as what am I going to do? But we do get, what am I? There's just a moment or a few seconds of panic, worry, anxiety, which actually sometimes can extend longer. You know that, longer than a few seconds. Sometimes it can extend for an hour. Sometimes it can extend for the afternoon until you sort yourself out on it. Or really until you devise a system of dealing with the problem. It's often not until then that you have the recollection to look up to the Lord and say, well, Lord, you of course can help me. And then we try to climb out of the pit of our own self-help. And of course, that is utterly contradictory to God's Word. And we know that, you know, if you look at it, it's the verse that actually we've dealt with partly already in Ephesians chapter 1. And it's just really categorical, you know, the statement there, Ephesians 1 and 22. It's page 1017, Ephesians 1 and 22. And He has put all things under His feet, and has made Him the head over all things for the church. And He has put all things but an overdrawn bank account. No. And He has put all things but your computer. No. And He has put all things but your car. No. And He has put all things but your brothers and sisters but the circumstances surrounding your vacation. No, no. He has put all things under his feet and has made him the head over all things for the church. We joke a bit in Raleigh because up Walter Scott, you know, some years ago from the Scroggie Library, and then found that the whole set were there. And yes, I've even, I think, taught some of Walter Scott's novels in the old days, but I've never read a lot of them. But lo and behold, I got caught into Walter Scott. Of course, my wife laughs at me because I always say, oh, another boring Walter Scott novel I've struggled through, because he's an antiquary. He delights in old things and gives details upon details about the historical situation of the 16th, 17th centuries. And somewhere in there he gets a thrill story like Ivanhoe or Rob Roy, you know, but usually it's boring, but it's interesting to me because it often shows where linguistic expressions have come from through Old English, and often it gives the background to some Christian and religious facts that are surprising. And above all, it helps you to understand the history of the time in a human way. It tells you the way that people actually lived anyway. The last one was Ivanhoe. And of course, one of the things that Ivanhoe deals with is the whole code of chivalry that governed the knights in armor. In those days, there was so little law in the land, in all the lands, Europe as well as England, that some of the few people who could be depended upon to bring order were these errant knights, these wandering knights, who were very noble in their own lives and their own hearts, and very brave and courageous. So Richard the Lionheart does stand for something that is very virtuous. But anyway, one of the practices, of course, that they followed was when they were fighting with lances or swords or spears, and they would get the upper hand of their enemy. In one instance, Richard the Lionheart had this guy on the ground and the sword pointing at his throat because he had broken the other fellow's sword completely. And he then said, "Death or surrender?" And then the knight had to answer whether he wanted death or surrender. And if he said surrender, then Richard the Lionheart put his foot on top of him, and he was under his feet. And he was regarded as conquered. And then at that moment, he would let him up. And this man was honor bound not to run away. And so Richard the Lionheart told him which cellar to go to, and the fellow had to go there and stay. Even though his own friends came and said, "Look, we'll rescue you," he says, "No, I cannot leave, because I have been defeated." So it was that code of chivalry. What came home to me with that was he has put all things under his feet. They're there. Now, they may appear to be alive and be in a cellar, but they can only do what he permits them to do. They can only, that knight cannot do anything that his conqueror does not allow him to do. So the knight may be walking around. He may appear to be alive. He may appear to have all his powers. He may even have a sword in his hand. But he cannot do what the conqueror will not permit him to do. And of course, that's it. Christ has all things under his feet. Now, how did that come about? Well, look back to Isaiah 53. Well-known verse, you know, Isaiah 53. And verse 4. Surely he has borne our griefs. You know, footnote X is sicknesses. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. The whole world, with everyone in it, with every situation that has ever occurred in it, was made inside Jesus. And Jesus bore all its sins and griefs and pains and sicknesses inside himself. I don't know if you realize it, but Nero at his garden parties had a way of providing light for his guests. He brought in Christians, covered them with tar, and set them alight. And he used those torches to light up his garden parties. Christ bore the pain of every one of those men and women and children who burned as torches in Nero's garden parties. Moreover, the guilt or the doubt or the wondering or sometimes the anger, sometimes the hatred, sometimes the complete irresponsibility that Nero felt in his heart, Jesus bore that in his heart. He bore that sin and grief. He not only did that, but he bore all the circumstances that needed to be changed and adjusted so that the little children who did survive would develop lives that were in accordance with our Father's will. Jesus brought all that about. But not only that. The hard words that you have spoken either to parents or to other people, Jesus has borne those inside himself. And the guilt that you have felt and the regret and remorse that you have felt at times in your own hardness and harshness, he has borne that also in his heart. He has borne all those things inside himself. And because of that, he has completely faced all the wrong things that have happened in our world and in our lives. He has borne them and endured them and experienced them fully. And because of that, his Father has put all those things under his feet as things that have already passed, have already been dealt with. That's why there is that verse in the lesson that we read. Just look at it. It's in Joshua. It's right at the beginning, you remember. Joshua 6. And verse 2. And the Lord said to Joshua, See, I have given into your hand Jericho with its king and mighty men of valor. See, I have given into your hand Jericho. Well, Joshua could well have said, look, verse 1, chapter 6. Now Jericho was shut up from within and from without because of the people of Israel. None went out and none came in. He was fully justified in saying, Lord, Jericho is shut up. Nobody can get in, nobody can get out. And you say, I have given into your hand. But he had given into his hand already because Jesus had borne all that inside himself. He had endured the power of the people inside Jericho. He had brought about the destruction of the walls inside himself. He had borne all that inside himself. That was already all done. It's already been dealt with. And you know, if you say to me, well, I mean, how could it be? I mean, Jesus doesn't know that I'd have an AST computer. Jesus doesn't know that I'd have a Mondeo that had a flat tire or a motorbike that broke down. Unless he was able to bear everything that would ever happen. And of course, that's what it was. All the years of your life, every day of them, was written in his book before there were any of them. And Jesus inside himself has borne all your life. every event in it, every situation, every pain that you have or will have, everything that will go wrong in your life, he has borne it so that you would be free from it. So that you would be free. So that the moment, the very moment that you heard the air going out of the tire, at that very moment, you could know this is happening to reveal to you yet one more thing that has already been dealt with by Jesus, that has already been cleared up. I mean, you can see how proud we are that we actually think that we do anything or bring anything about or can solve anything. I mean, it is incredible, the conceit that we have, that we think we can handle it. And so we screw a screw in a nut and we say we devised the screw and we devised the nut, and of course that's the way it works. Let it break for some reason or other, or let it become unthreaded, or let it break the thread, and we just say, oh, well, we don't know why that happened. But we convince ourselves that, of course, we brought the whole thing about. We know fine well that there's no solidity in that screw, that it's a lot of protons and neutrons flying around, but we glibly say, oh yeah, well, that's the way it works, you know, yeah, so if we know the way it works. And the whole thing is a miracle. But we keep convincing ourselves that we bring something about, or that we can solve something, or that this situation that has come up is something that is utterly undealt with. God has never seen it before. Nobody has ever dealt with it before. This is a first time only, and we have to sort this thing out. No, we haven't the wisdom to do that. We haven't the ability. That has all been done already by God in his Son Jesus. And so there is only one way to deal with the events and happenings, either in the business or in our own personal lives, or just in our little fiddling lives that we live around the house here. There is only one way to deal with every event that happens. God has already dealt with this. He's already solved this. There's really only one thing you can say. Surely he has borne our sins and carried our sorrows. That's really the only thing you can say. Surely he has already borne this sin, carried this sorrow, borne this pain, and borne this sickness. And I can relax and can just thank him for it. He may let the night get up. He may allow him to appear as if he's still alive. But you can know that that is all under his control. And he can do nothing. That enemy can do nothing that Jesus does not allow him to do. So whatever way God solves the thing is up to him, but that he has solved it is the center of our peace and our confidence. So really, there's only one way to operate, you know. And I think you know, I'm preaching to this man as much as to you. There is only one way to operate, and that is not a shadow, not a cloud in the sky. Not 1 second of anxiety. Not 1 second of uncertainty or worry. Not 1 second of panic. But absolute peace, absolute confidence that God has put all things under his feet and has made him the head over all things for the church. And all things have already been accomplished. Let's pray.